Hey, this is Pierre Dulaco talking. Why Microsoft Viva is important? I want to answer this question because I think there's a lot of people who are skeptical about Viva. They see it as a not so dry product with not so impactful features. It's definitely not critical as email is. So why will you purchase Viva when there's a license? I think that's a legit question, and I really think it really there's no, you know, yeah, you should use Viva or not, you should not use Viva. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve and on your culture. So let me try to expand on this a little bit. So first, the way I position Viva first is to look at what challenges it addresses. I think the first one is information chaos, where you have maybe a lot of SharePoint side, a lot of team side, a lot of content spread around your Microsoft 365. It's not well structured. There are some duplicates. People are doing the same things in different silos. There's a loss of energy there. The people are reinventing the wheel, and you might not even know who has expertise, especially when you're in a large organization. That can be a very important an important issue. Um, on the other Another challenge is for the organization is the fact with COVID, there's a raise in burnout and a lot of issue in terms of well-being, but also a lot of issues in productivity. People are not, having too many meetings, too many emails, and they all don't have the time to, handle their work. I've been working with a lot of customers who, when I ask them, "Do you have too many meetings?" The only answer is yes. And when I ask them how they manage to work with those meetings, with too many meetings, they said, we're multitasking and we're working after hours. So there are some issues in terms of productivity and in terms of well-being. With productivity can have a bad impact on well-being. Another challenge is the war on talents. We all know that it's hard to recruit people, especially in certain areas, like IT is one, but there's a lot of areas where it's very difficult to find people and even more to retain people. So I think you might have seen that Microsoft and Apple just raised the salary of their employees because they know that it's better to keep people but if you want to keep people, it's a way to do it is to raise salary, but it also is to, especially with the young generation, is to train them and to upskill them so they can get more value from your organization. And so people are again there's too much work and not enough people to do the work and not enough talent to do the work. And definitely, these people, when they have to decide if they need to work, especially managers, they will decide, they should drop the learning, the training they have uh, to do to upskill them, and so they will, work and definitely will have a bad impact on the well-being again, and they won't be as upskilled. And often they don't see a lot of value in the training because it's corporate training and they have to go through. And I understand that some of those training courses are mandatory, but some are not. And then where should I spend if I have to spend time? Where should I spend it? And it's better to know where you should get the best return on investment in what training, and that comes usually not from the top. It's coming from your peers, so it's really key that you engage in this. The last challenge might not be the last, but one of the biggest challenge that I see with organization is the application of silos and having business unit departments division working without connecting and without sharing their knowledge, without sharing what they're doing, and without transparency. And that comes with a lack of engagement often, where, as you might have seen the Gallup survey, there is between 70% of and 80% of people who are not engaged when they're working. So that means they're only coming from the paycheck, and 25% of people are very reluctant and negative about the organization. So that's the engagement that we see with a lot of organization, and that can explain also the big quit and the lack of the lack of commitment with an organization. So we can see definitely there's a lack of transparency, a lack. It often it's a cultural thing, but it's also the fact that people don't understand the global purpose of what they're doing. They don't connect with their goals with the organization. They have too many communication avenues. So when you have too many communication avenues, at the end, you don't read those communications. You don't read your emails because you feel they're maybe you read them once, twice, maybe three times, and then you think it's not valuable for you, so you drop it after all, because you think it's useless for you. And so it doesn't help to engage with people, and really the key to engagement is to let people to have initiatives and being able to share their knowledge and share their ideas of how to improve the work, for example. So those are some four main challenges, big challenges that we see in organization, and Viva can address that. It's Viva is just a product, so it's not just a solution. It's not just Viva that we're talking about. So, but let's talk about some benefit of that I can see in Viva, and so I'm going to list a few of them. So from Viva Connections, I think it's the benefit of Viva Connections, which is, if I can summarize Viva Connections in one sentence, it's SharePoint in your teams. So it's a way to centralize corporate information in a central place, which is not just SharePoint, it's SharePoint in your teams, where you're working, because most other people are working in Teams today. So having the intranet surfaced in Teams is a better place to have access to this information, and maybe also to be aware of this information. But also, it's not only for corporate information, it's for specific to me information. So like I have access to a certain application because I'm a frontline worker. Other people won't have access to this application. So I might want to see that. I might want to see the news that are tailored to my profile, and all the news. I don't want to take too much time to look at everything. I just want to see things that are relevant to me. So that's another benefit of connections. You can tailor information depending on what we call the audience, so who is concerned by this information. And also it's a place where you can search centrally. Without leaving Teams, you can search information across the board. And it's also definitely a way to access to your internet info of your work. So without leaving Teams, you don't have to switch from one environment to the other. You can navigate in your intranet directly from Teams. They are the main benefits I see in Viva Connections. And Viva Connection is free, so you should leverage it as soon as possible. Viva Insight, I think there's a lot of benefits in Viva Insight. There's individual benefit, like you can catch up on information, you can see what you missed. You receive so many emails, and so Viva Insight can tell you, oh, this is maybe an important email based on a question that has been asked in an email or in a chat. So it will remind you that you have asked a question and you might not have had the answer. So it will remind you, maybe you want to follow up on that. So that's a way to catch up on this flow of email that always often is buried in your inbox. It's also a chance to organize better your time, so you can use Viva Insight to block some time to focus on work rather than just being swallowed in meetings, in a lot of meetings. So you can set some time aside to focus on your work. You can definitely manage your interactions. You can say to Viva Insight, who you're working with, who's important to you. So Viva Insight will give you information coming from those people rather than other people. Can better manage your time, as I said, because you can, for example, you can use what Microsoft is calling a virtual commute. So at the end of the day, you can go through, or whenever you want, you can send a notification and go through a wizard for the next day to see what's coming, what's our next meeting for tomorrow, what are the tasks I want to assign to me for tomorrow, etc. But what is really, really very impactful, potentially very impactful, is the analytics around your organization, not just on a personal level, but on a global level. So that's how you can figure out what is the culture of operational culture of your organization, because it will analyze signals like the emails you send, the meetings you have, when you send them, to who you send them, who you collaborate with, who you're going to have chat with, are you working after hours, and so many indicators that are very powerful, and not because you know it's just indicators that you usually don't have access to, but it also reveals how people are working. And if you're in a large organization, it's hard to figure out how people are working, and it's hard to slice down the information. How people are working in this division, or you can even slice down on different topics you want to slice down. For example, if you inject information coming from your HR system on whatever criteria, you can slice down on this criteria, the region that people are working in, or the department, or some specific criteria. So and then you can figure out and tune what's not working well and what's working well. Then you need to decide how you're going to act on it. So Viva Insight is really, to me, is the most beneficial component of Viva, and it's especially for leadership team and HR. For Viva Topics, it's also a beneficial module, and I like to say Viva Topic is a way to structure and unstructure. So it helps people to discover knowledge and expertise. When you join a company and you don't know how the company is organized, you don't know where the information is, you don't know where the source of truth, you can try the first day to search in Office 365. You will find on a keyword, you will find thousands of resources, and you don't know what is the right resources. You don't know who are the expert. You cannot find the expertise. You cannot find the information unless somebody is telling you, and maybe somebody is going to tell you, but it's not the accurate source of truth. It's very common. So it's really a way to discover this knowledge and expertise. And before that, you need to organize this knowledge and expertise. So it helps AI. It's based on AI. AI will help you to identify where is the knowledge, and then it's a partnership between AI and people. What we call knowledge workers, who are going to say, okay, this is, you call something, but it's not important. This is important. That's where the information is. So, and then you train AI to better understand where is the accurate information, and then you render it for the end user so they can see the source of truth, see where are the important documents, where are the important sites that are related to the topic, where are the important people that are working on this topic, the subject. And again, it's going to be surfaced wherever you are in Office 365. So at this moment, you can search a topic, you can reference to a topic in a web email. It's coming soon to Teams. Going to come to Outlook, the rich desktop application, and you also topics will be referenced in SharePoint page. Whenever there's a keyword that is a topic, it will be highlighted, and so you just have to over it, and you will find the topics, and you find the people who are experts. You find the documents that are important. You find the intranet sites that are important, the links that are important. So you will find the source of truth and the help you might need. The last component is Viva Learning. So Viva Learning is really uh, just a way to surface any kind of learning content. It can be LMS, it can be resources, internal resources, training resources, or how to do things, guides, or whatever it is. It can be also platforms like LinkedIn Learning, content that help you to learn. And Viva Learning is just a way to surface this content with some criteria to filter and search, and but also to bring this knowledge directly in Teams in the flow of your work. So it's a way to have access to training directly from the tool you're working on every day, which is Teams today. And also, it's a way to for people to recommend some content, and because we know that you learn more from what other people are saying that is valuable for you, because they know what your profile is, you know what your work is, what you're like in general, and so they can recommend you. They saw a training, they can say, oh, look at this training, this is very useful. And also you can do that from a management perspective. You can say, okay, this is very important, and you can set the training to be to be you can recommend the training so people can with a due date, so people can follow this training, and you can have a follow up on this, and engage your team in learning the topics that are the learning courses that are important for them from a management perspective. So it's not just management from a management perspective that's important, but it's also for peer perspective. That's really, I think, really a big differentiator. That where you can, when you go to an LMS, it's often very complicated to navigate. It's you don't know if you're gonna how much time you're gonna spend, if it's valuable time. Here you have the voice of your peers or your manager to say, hey, you should look at that. And also you have some trending, so you can see what's trending, what are the trending that are trending right now. So I might be interested in, if a lot of people are looking at this training, that might be worth the time to look at this training too. But what I wanted to share with you is for Viva, and I didn't talk about the OKR new tool Viva Goals, because I don't have any enough insight on it so far. But I'll as soon as I have access to it, I'll do a video on it. But so what I wanted to share with you is that, to me, those implementing Viva is those projects of implementing Viva is it's not heavy in terms of IT work. There's some work still that is listed here, but 80% is non IT related. 80% is curating content with topics. It's either business analyst work, or it's an OCM work, where you need to define what you're going to do with insights you found, and how are you going to act on the well-being of people, how are you going to increase productivity, what are the campaigns you want to conduct, how are you going to conduct those campaigns, how are you going to transform your organization, who you're going to define as a knowledge workers, and having that kind of you know non-IT work is essential to Viva. Viva is not just a magic wand that you put in, deploy, and you get the value of it. I will say that for a lot of people, there's a wish that Viva will solve things, like products will solve things for you, but it's just like for other tools. It's not just the tools; it's how you use the tools depending on your culture, depending on your needs. So that's really key to understand that. And so I will say that let's start with connections. I think I try to explain the important tasks that you need to achieve for each component. So with the connections, I think, and for all the other components, you first need to define the roles and responsibilities. Who's going to have access to what, and what are the different security you want to implement regarding connections. Then I think it's important, since unless you already have a great intranet, you don't want to change, you don't want to enhance. Um, you wouldn't need those interviews. But if you really want to tailor the content on for a specific audience and target it differently from one audience to the other, then you have to work with the stakeholders to understand, what they really need, what is important, what are the apps important, what the information that are important to the people. So you need to have some interviews with various stakeholders, and then you need to define the audience. You need to figure out what you want to segment depending on the audience. So you need to define those audiences. There's some technical work. If you didn't modernize your SharePoint site, you need to modernize it because it won't work. It's a requirement for a Viva Connection implementation. That includes you need to add a global navigation, because then in Teams you will be able to navigate in your SharePoint more easily directly in Teams. Um, and you will have to provide some dedicated cards, adaptive cards, to present specific information, specific apps directly into Teams in Viva Connection, so people can see, depending on their profile, they'll see or they won't see the um, the cards, and so you need to define what are those cards, and then you need to develop them. So it's not a complicated development. Often it's out of the box is enough. Sometimes you have to use the adaptive card framework, which is just simple code, but you still need a developer to do that and to present. For example, if you have to have an app that requires to do something regarding COVID when you're coming to a building, maybe it's different policy depending on the building or depending on the country or whatever. So you might want to have different adaptive cards depending on the people, and you might want to have a specific app that go through a series of questions regarding COVID symptoms, for example. Or there's you can imagine whatever specific adaptive cards you want, like what's on the menu today in the cafeteria. So it can be different cafeteria depending on the building. So you might have different apps, or you might want to tailor that differently between the audience. So you can figure out what adaptive cards you want and develop them. I think one benefit is not a requirement, but it's definitely a benefit to have Yammer communities connected to Viva Connections, because it's a way to better engage with people, better connect people. That's one of the targets, is breaking silos and create engagement. So you need to have if you didn't think that way before, you really need to have a strategy around leveraging Yammer in your intranet with the development of communities. So focus on building Yammer communities is important. If you don't have that already, maybe you want to extend that to bring more value to the end users. The SharePoint news is heavily leveraged too, so you need to understand how it works, how you can boost the news so it's visible to everybody, um, how you can tailor news and how it works and how it's consumed in Viva Connections. So that's definitely something you need to work on. And then you have specific content that you can put in Viva Connections, so the feed. It's a consumption of news. There's a dashboard, there's a consumption of the adaptive cards. So that's mostly technical implementation here, not very complicated. And the targeting of your adaptive card depending on your audience. So it's a mix of technical things. It's not very technical. It's just you need to understand where the adaptive cards are living and how you can target them to what audience. So you need to know what audience should see this adaptive card in what order, what size, etc. And then you also need to deploy Viva Connections, the app. So you can deploy that. Usually there's some scripting just to be sure that it doesn't break previous Teams policy. So there might be some PowerShell involved, just to be sure that you're deploying first to a certain audience. If you want to do a pilot, just deploy Viva Connections to a pilot. Do some scripting, just so people who are in the pilot only see the Viva connection, other people don't see it yet. And then there's an aspect on, you know, communicating the change. I don't think there's need for training for Viva connections, quite frankly. I think it's straightforward, but I think there's a need for communication. You know, then people need to understand what's coming and what the purpose of it, what is the benefits, what are the benefits, and so on. Topics, same pattern, define roles and responsibility. You need to list what are your expected topics, what are you expecting, what kind of information you will love to have, and you know, for example, I'll take planet. We you would like to have, you know, as topics technologies, name of the technologies. When there's Teams, when there's Yammer, when there's Office 365, we would like to have a topic to see where the content and where the expertise is. But not only, we might want to have a customer name as a topic, so we can see every information connected to a customer. We might want to have the word scope of work because we're writing a lot of scope of work, so we can find where the scope of work are stored, etc. So you need to define your expected topics and also interview. A way to find that is to interview stakeholders to see what topics are resonating with them. And then you need to identify what you want to crawl. You're going to ask AI to crawl things. You might not want to include everything. This might be some sensitive information you don't want to crawl and you don't want to be surfaced by topics. There might be also other topics you want to exclude. You don't want, you know, if you're in the middle of a merger and acquisition, you don't want the name of the acquisition mentioned, maybe you want to exclude that from the topics. So there's some admin work here to define what you want to crawl, what you want to exclude. And then you need to assign licenses since it's not free, and understand what the roles and responsibilities, who's doing what license is needed to do what job. Then you can launch the crawling, and you'll have to wait for, I think, a maximum 2 days. Maybe it will be more depending on the size of the organization. And the crawling will keep on going all the time. It's deep learning, so Viva Topic is going to learn more and more after you interact with it. And then you need to train your knowledge workers and the contributors to understand how it works, what their role is, what your expectations are, because that's a crucial work, is to tell AI what is valid, what is not, and also for a knowledge worker is okay, when you said what is valid or not, you also need to organize your topic so you can, for example, add some web parts with important links, because the topic page is definitely a SharePoint page that you can enhance with as a SharePoint page with different content. If you want to highlight a specific video that explains the topic, you can add a link to a video directly in the page, and so it's going to be easier for users to navigate to your topic. And this definitely, then they need to start to curate the topics and enhance the topic, and eventually create missing topics. Maybe AI didn't find the topics, was not smart enough, so you need to tell AI how to work. And so if you find there's one topic is missing, is important to you, then you create the topic, you reference the site where you think the information is valuable for the topics, and then the AI of topics will work after that, and you can come back on it and curate that again. So really, it's a matter of curating, enhancing the topic to make it better along the time. It's not just one shot. It's a constant work to make sure that the information is accurate. And again, you need to communicate about the change. So the training is not only for knowledge worker, for end user. You just have to communicate. That you might ask them to say if they're involved in topics, so you can bring some more value, so you can show that you're an expert on a subject, for example. But also you need to communicate on how to use the topics, how you can search a topic and find the source of truth. What is the meaning of the topic? When you define the topic, it means it's a source of truth. I will hide how it will show. It will show in search. It will show in SharePoint page. You can refer to a topic in a webmail, etc. So there's some communication here. Viva Insights is definitely the workload that is more time consuming in terms of project, because first, same thing, you need to define roles and responsibilities, who can have access to what in Viva Insight. There's different levels. There's people insight, manager insight, and organization insight or leadership insights. So you need to define that, define some roles, because even in the leadership insights or organization insight, there's different roles that people can analyze data, people can query data, and so there's different level of roles here. So you need to define those roles, but you need to interview with HR and maybe some leaders and business users to identify, what are their, their how their team are structured, what are the pattern, what are the policy in terms of, for example, of meetings or one-on-one meetings with their managers, and just to figure out, what is important, what kind of data is important for them, and what kind of data they would like to have, and having a discussion on what events that can bring, what kind of data, what kind of dashboard can bring to see where there's an echo, where it resonates. So that's some discussion you need to have with HR and leaders. And then you need to train the HR and analysts to understand the dashboards, being able to analyze the dashboard, being able eventually to enhance some queries to find out more, slice down the information that are stored in the data in the dashboard with more details. So you can train these people, and you can identify, with HR and leaders, what are the top 5, 10 dashboard you want to have access to and you want to act on. So that's some discussion again you have to with HR and leaders. I can tell you from experience that there's gonna be some people who are reluctant. There gonna be some people some people who want to understand it all before trying it. So I think my strategy is to for sure explain how the indicators works, etc., etc. But also you need to start to change this culture of knowing it all versus knowing it all. So I think it's important to make people understand that even if they don't understand all the data, they need to try it, and they need to expand who can have access to this dashboard to more leaders, because having different leaders having different view of or different interpretation of the data is important. Having this kind of discussion to make people understand, what are those dashboards, how do they work, before, usually people want to know it all because they're afraid of changing things. So it's really um, it's really common that leaders are scared of dashboards, that kind of dashboards, cultural. It's cultural dashboards because they're afraid of the consequences. But it's fine to be afraid. But let's first investigate and discuss about it and see how we can act after. So another important thing is to work with HR, or you can inject, and what kind of information you can inject from your HR system, information system, because that's going to be the way to segment information. If you want to segment per division, if you want to segment per job description, job title, then you need to inject that. There's other data you can inject, like CRM data, if it's possible, for example, to have dashboard that can tell you if when you have a lot of email and meetings with a customer, if it has an impact on the revenue with this customer, that kind of stuff. So you can also inject CRM, but I will encourage you to start with HR data. It's mandatory. You need to inject HR data. So work with your HR so they can provide you with this data. And then you can run the dashboard, and again, there's a little latency. You have to wait at least a day, I think, to see the result. Assign the licenses to the roles just to be sure people will get the right level of um, dashboard access. And then you can eventually build specific dashboards if you want to create specific dashboards that are not provided out of the box. You can query, and then you need to start to analyze those dashboards. And it's when you figure out that, for example, there's a risk of burnout because people are working after hours um, heavily, or there's I don't know, there's too people are working too much in silos because it Viva Insight will see who you communicating with in email or chat, and if Viva Insight sees that you're only talking to people who are in your team, that means first that means they're silo and you're not accessing your knowledge from other teams. So there might be a problem. Some teams might be okay with that. All the teams might not be okay. So start to analyze those dashboards with different managers and see what comes out of it, and see if they have some sort of interpretation, if it hurts their feelings, if for what reasons, and they're probably going to change it, and so you can engage in discussion analyzing that, and then you need to build a strategy out of it. So what are you going to act, how are you going to act on it, how what data you want to act on. People not having enough one-on-one with their managers, is it a problem? Do you want to act on it? Do you want to train managers to be sure that they have a one-on-one meeting every week, every month, whatever it is? Define this policy, or you can convince them that you need to do that instead of doing something. And Viva Insight will give you some insight directly in Teams with some insights, generic insight coming from Microsoft, some ideas that you can work on. But you definitely need to have a real strategy and communicate this strategy, run this strategy, probably elaborate a digital workplace etiquette so it enables better work alignment, better some guidance, some common governance, common protocol to follow, so people work better together and respect others, and avoid working after hours, avoid sending emails after hours, whatever it is. You need to work on the digital workplace etiquette. Then you need to deploy Viva Insight, just as I said. Most of the time it's already deployed for personal insights, so if you didn't, you should deploy it. And then there's for managers and leaders. And then you need to communicate about the change, so it's the consequences of what your strategy, and there's a way to communicate. It's going to be different from one organization to the other. Maybe you want to communicate based on your findings or not. So it depends on your culture. If you want to be transparent, you say, okay, we discovered that 70% of employees didn't have a one-on-one with their manager. So due to that, we're going to implement a new policy. That's transparent. Maybe it's others just want to say, okay, now we have this new policy that the manager should have a one every 2 weeks, and don't explain why you're doing that. So it depends on your culture, but you need to define that and communicate to the people. And definitely you need to train managers how to use and how to leverage the dashboard, their dashboard, because it's specific My Team dashboard, where they can see, their team's habit, if they're missing some one-on-one meeting with their reports, So you can train them on how to leverage that, but also how to communicate and how to make life better at work, basically. You can also train some champions on how to use personal insights. I think most of the people see the digest email every day and they don't think it's valuable, but there's more to it. Yeah, there's in the Teams app there's more insight, but also there's in Outlook there's an add-in that gives a lot of information that are very useful on a personal standpoint. So I think you should train champions so they can explain to their peers how valuable it is. And I think it's important to see how it evolves, to see if what you've done in terms of implementing policy, changing your culture, if it's working or not. So keep an eye on your dashboards and look at if the trend are going in the right direction and adjust your strategy depending on how those numbers are evolving. Finally, Viva Learning. I think Viva Learning, there's not a lot of steps here. You just need to define roles and responsibility again, and you can start with interviewing the manager and HR to see, to identify, what kind of training is important to your team, and or what training you think is not important and you have to follow, and how your team is complaining about training. Do they have time for training? That kind of question. So interview with manager and HR to figure out, where the organization is standing in terms of training, and work with them to identify, what are the training do you think are valuable for, the whole organization, or maybe for your team, or maybe for a segment of people. And maybe sometimes you have your own training, you build your own training, so then you need to work on how I can make Viva surface this training that is not an outsourced training. So you can definitely do that if you import in your SharePoint. So you need to figure out, what it is, and then how to implement it. So you will need some help from technical people that are going to include in SharePoint. They're going to set up Viva Learning to surface this content to be discovered in Viva Learning. So eventually, if you're connecting to LMS or a content system, you need to implement that. So it's not rocket science, it's integration, but it has to be done by admin. And then you need to assign a license, just same thing than the other components, except Viva Connections, because Viva Connections is free. And same thing, you need to deploy Viva Learning, the Viva Learning app. So again, if you want to target to a pilot first, you need some scripting. If you're not, you just have to deploy it, activate it in the admin console. And again, you need to communicate about this change. So I don't think there's no need to have a training for Viva Learning. It's just about communicating what it does, what the benefits are, how you can leverage it as a manager, as an end user. Example, you should recommend people to share the training they find interesting with their peers, and you can show them how they can do that. The only, maybe you can train champions so they can explain that to their peers, but it's not much of a training. And you can train the manager, how to, recommend and track, but it's very short training. So usually you can do that with a communication or a short video, but you can do that. Every manager could do that in his meeting team in his team meeting with his team and explain, hey guys, you can look at Viva Learning now. This is how it works. I encourage everybody to share the training that are valuable for you and share it with your peers. And I will recommend, as a manager, I will recommend some of them. Are they mandatory or not? You need to decide what is mandatory or not. But this is how it works, and I think what is really important is to tell people that is what are the benefits for them, and a little bit about how it works. But even if it's simple to understand, but mostly what are the benefits, and even more importantly, why taking the time to learn is important, and what's the ultimate benefit for everybody. So that was my talk about Viva. Is it important or not? it really depends on your culture and what you're trying to achieve. It's not a magic one. It's not like I don't have email. I need email. Um, I need to deploy Office 365 for email or for meetings. That's not that kind of need that is targeted here. It's more about rationalizing how you work, and it really depends on your culture. Uh, you know, for example, I'll take the example of topics because I have a recent discussion about it. I have a chaos. I have a lot of SharePoint team site. It's a chaos. People are lost. We just migrated SharePoint on-prem or file server in Office 365, and people are lost. They don't know where the information. Okay, it's not a magic one that topic's gonna save you. You need it's a tool, so it will help if only if you have the will to create this information. It will help to create this information because it will do the initial crawl and find the information for you. But then you will have to have somebody who's going to take some time to create it and say this is valid, this is not valid. Where is the source of truth? Who are the right experts to bug if there's a need for a question? This work still has to happen. So if you're not in that mind spirit of allocating some people to do this work to make life better for others, then topics won't help. It just will discover a bunch of things, but you might not know if it's accurate or not. Still, it will discover it. It will bring it a little bit together. So it will do a little bit, but it won't bring the value. The value is in between the intersection between what AI is doing and what people are enhancing, how they're helping AI to get value. That was my point. 80% is not IT work. It's really strategic work, communication work, change management work, training work, business analyst work. And there's still some work to deploy it correctly and eventually develop a few things. Hope this was helpful.